All right, guys. Hey, we got China McCarney here on the line. Well, I guess Zoom. I don't know. It's not really technically a podcast, so something extra that we're trying to record. He's a vice president for Jaeger Sports, author of a book called Off the Field, and an author of a book called Tell Your Story. China, thanks for taking the time, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Ryan.
Sorry for that redundancy too. I know I thanked you a lot already before we started recording too, so I apologize. So anyways, to kind of get started, can you maybe tell us a little bit about maybe how you got started with Jaeger Sports, kind of what your role is as vice president, and then maybe we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I went to a Jaeger Sports camp when I was 12 years old, 21 years ago. So you can do the math. Thanks. And just kind of fell in love with the throwing program. I was from a really small town, so the training there was non-existent, let's just say. And so when I went to that camp, I was exposed to that level of training and preparation and all that kind of stuff. I just fell in love with it, and so stayed with it throughout my entire career. And as I started to get a little older, 17, 18, 19 years old, the mental game, the mental side of Jaeger Sports really became attractive to me. Alan Jaeger, the founder, owner, mentor of mine forever. We had a lot of conversations and different things about anxiety, mental health, different stuff like that. And it really just became a passion of mine. And I've been fortunate enough to kind of grow within their company. And yeah, now vice president, which basically means I do everything from putting a J-band in an envelope to going around the country and speaking on their behalf. So it's been a blessing. I'm truly blessed, and it's just my passion. I love Jaeger Sports and what I get to do every day for sure.
That's awesome. I'm digging those. I'm digging that hat you're wearing too. Are those on the website?
They are not yet. Yeah, this is a program we were working on called Interactive Arm Care, where we were going to try to do some more stuff, and we had 4 prints made up. But who knows? Maybe we can get some more, or we should just do a similar hat and just have Jaeger Sports underneath, because I love them too. A little retro.
Yeah, those look cool.
Yeah.
So kind of going off your books, the Off the Field book, where did that kind of stem from? What kind of motivated you to put all that into a book? Because that was your first book, correct? Off the Field?
Correct. Yeah. And it came shortly after I kind of dealt with retiring. I retired in 2012, and being from the town I was, in the family I was, we had never experienced anything close to professional sports. And so there was this, unique external pressure for me to keep playing professional baseball. And I probably played a couple years even after the passion had left me. And so it was more a letter to my support group, really, is what it kind of started as. Is I wanted to express, kind of my journey through the game, why the passion left me because of external forces and different stuff like that. And also a thank you to everybody that had kind of been, with me along my journey. And it also was just a cathartic experience for me to just get it all out. It was like putting the bow on my playing career. This is how it went. This is kind of the different things that led to retirement, and, the different lessons I learned along the way that could maybe help some people. And so that was kind of the basis of the first book, is just a reflection and kind of just tying everything that I learned in that great run of pursuing baseball every year for 20 years.
That's really, really cool. So I guess in terms of that, we talk to a lot of players, and I feel like there's more pressure on even youth players and high school players right now than ever before. I've had multiple high school players kind of break down and kind of share some things that, that go on at home. And it's not necessarily stuff about broken families. It's not stuff of, crazy things. A lot of it has to do with like school and like just the pressure they feel from, getting a 4.0 or, all the crazy, trying to compete with somebody in their class and the pressure they feel at home. So would you say like writing some of your thoughts out, whether it turns into a book and it's something, that it's shared with everybody, or something that's just more personal, kind of journaling, is that something you feel is beneficial in general?
Yeah, 100%. Journaling, anywhere where you can be honest where you don't feel there's a bias judging you or anything like that is when your most natural and most genuine thoughts come out. And journaling by yourself, you're not going to get more genuine than that, because you can protect it. No one should see it. And you can just get it all out. And then you can read it and kind of formulate your action plan based on, oh, I didn't know I was feeling this way, but now that I've got it on paper, I can turn this into a goal. Or this is really bugging me with this person. I need to have a conversation with them. Like if something keeps coming up in the journal. So yeah, it's definitely very, very beneficial, and it just helps organize thoughts for action, which is kind of, when you read off the field, that's kind of what everything boils down to. Is you can formulate thoughts, you can get all this, but you've got to take action towards whatever the changes you want to see. And but yes, to answer your question in short, absolutely, journaling is incredible for sure.
What can coaches and parents do, just thinking of that, kind of thinking back on that experience, what would have made you feel comfortable to vocalize that? And maybe you did with certain mentors or certain people. What makes it a safe place? Because obviously it's tough. And Rich Benjamin was just on recently, and he was talking about kind of a culture in a box. Like, these players feel like they have to fit check all these boxes and be inside the box, versus thinking of growth as like a line. And not every player is going to be a 10 out of 10 out of everything, but they're going to fake it to try to fit inside that box. And so as a coach, we want to like let them know, hey, we're with you. Like, it's okay that you're a 5, in this area. Like, I'm here for you. Like, I'm not going to leave you there. I'm going to try to like help you in through that, and you can be open and honest with me. But obviously as a player, and I remember that too, I remember trying to fit inside that box and all the other things and all the verbs and what players said, when they call players out after the game for good things, like you try to imitate that and all the other stuff. So what kind of environment can coaches or parents do to kind of make people feel more comfortable and less biased? Or is that just something where just human nature just doesn't allow that even to happen in those vulnerable states?
I think it's a combination of both. I think definitely human nature, just the culture of athletics. And like when you talked about school and 4.0 and this and that, there's a reaction I have. I'm 33. I don't care about GPA anymore, but it still gets to me because I know how important that was for me when I was pursuing it. And so there is a little bit of that just because of the culture, but there's definitely action steps you can do. Communication, first and foremost, like you said, as a coach, if you're taking that first step, or let's put coaches and parents in the same, because that's who kids are most often worried about, that judgment, right? The coach or the parents. And so if you're taking that first step to let them know consistently and genuinely, like you said, that if they're not 10 out of 10 on those boxes, what can they be working on? And are you in that journey with them together? Or are they terrified that they're not 10 out of 10 or they're 8 out of 10, and the 2 that they're not, you're harping on it all the time, and they feel inferior, and their self-esteem is dropping and their confidence in their ability to perform is dropping. And so it's culture and communication, and those words are kind of words that are just thrown around. And I know a coach I had in college, he's like, we communicate here, my door is always open. Well, you felt like if you walked through that door, you were going to get punched in the face. And so you can't just say the words and then live completely opposite. It's effort, and it's tough sometimes for coaches. Coaches want to do, here's my program, here's the way it goes, and that's the way you're going to be, and trying to create like cookie cutter soldiers. You can have a culture and you can have, pillars of that culture, but you have to realize that you're leading human beings, and hopefully that's why you got into coaching. And so there's an individual aspect to every human being. And if you can, figure out ways to communicate with that on an individual basis while still building that overall culture of what you want as a program, that's your, billion-dollar formula. That's the Pete Carrolls of the world, and those guys that just seem to have this weird ability to have a culture and a program that they build every year, but then they also have a, almost an individual relationship with each one of their players that they're leading. And so I think it comes back to communication and analyzation within the parent and within the coach as to put yourself back in the player's role. I think that's one of the biggest, weirdest things to me is most parents that have children that played sports. That's why they play sports. It's like, oh, I played, I'm going to get them in youth sports or whatnot. And then coaches, for sure, I don't know what the percentage is, but they played at one point. And so it's always weird to me that coaches or parents lead in a way that's completely void of the player's kind of perception, because it's like, you were there. What would you have wanted as a coach or as a parent? And so if you can kind of flip that and look at it from that perspective in any relationship, really, but we're talking about parent, coach, parent, player, I think that could change the culture, change the confidence, and change the progression of player development and just development as a human being with self-confidence and stuff like that.
No, it's awesome. And so basically lead by example and stay consistent. I think that's really important too, because, you know, even if you do something, you know, I mean, even thinking about like my son right now and even kids I've played or players that I've coached in the past, like consistency isn't like one message, like every so often in a team meeting. It's like putting your arm around somebody and letting them know, like, it's okay, you know, or that you notice something good they did, or you know, whatever it is. It's not, and it can be different modalities, right? It doesn't have to just necessarily be like this big team meeting and just saying my door's open and
Yeah.
that stuff. But kind of moving on, I kind of want to talk about, you know, the Tell Your Story book that came out last year, 2 years ago. When
I think 2 years ago now, I think, yeah,
I'm
2018, I believe.
I'm
I know.
fine. Wow. All right. So tell your story. I've gotten really good feedback on it. You know, I mentioned that to you. Tell me kind of how you progressed from off the field into telling your story.
Yeah, so Tell Your Story is off the field was kind of my baseball journey. Tell Your Story is kind of my anxiety journey. I suffered my first panic attack in 2009, which was my junior year of college. And I don't think that's a coincidence. Junior year of college is typically your big draft year. I was projected top 5, 10 rounds. At the beginning of the season started to get away from me. I got moved to a reliever and just spiraled. And so I had my first panic attack, and I hid my mental health battle for 6 years, 2009 to 2015. I suffered in silence, didn't tell anybody because of the stigma, because of worried about coaches and scouts. What are they going to think? Are they going to think I'm mentally weak because I have anxiety? And so 2015, I reached out to a therapist. I had my worst panic attack and broke down. I knew I couldn't do it anymore alone. So I reached out to my therapist, or a therapist. She's now my therapist, and it changed my life. It gave me permission to tell my story. And about a year after that, when I got comfortable, I realized I wanted to create that avenue, even if it's just for one person that reads my story and they feel strong enough or brave enough to share their story, then that's all I wanted. And so I created the Athletes Against Anxiety and Depression Foundation in the winter of 2016, wrote the book Tell Your Story, and it's going to be kind of like my mission. The rest of my life is just anybody suffering in silence, trying to let them know they don't have to. And what's amazing now, which is awesome, is in 2020, the culture and the temperature around mental health is completely different than it was in 2009 when I started dealing with it. You have celebrities telling their story about, you know, Michael Phelps, Kevin Love, DeMar DeRozan, John Hamm, that they suffer from anxiety and depression. And so it's a lot more accepted now, which is awesome. And you can kind of tie that back to Jaeger sports, because long toss forever was looked at as this, you know, not everybody was on a 120-foot linear program, and then it's kind of opened up over the years, and everybody's seen the benefits of the long toss. And that's the same thing with mental health, is people realize if there's a comfortable culture around it, it's not this, you know, huge stigmatized thing, and 70% of people deal with it at some point in your life. So, yeah.
No, that's awesome. And I think what's important too is like, you know, I think a lot of people when they stop playing, especially, you know, college athletes who maybe have done nothing but play sports for their whole entire lives. Now they're expected to go out and be like a regular person. I mean, like college athletics is like a full-time job, and you know, you're not compensated for it other than maybe some scholarship money or things like that. And now it's like, okay, go be a real person.
Yeah.
And like, you know, Ryan Fitzgerald of the Boston Red Sox was just talking about this, you know, the other day too, is like, and I know, you know, NFL stars and people have said this phrase before too, is like, baseball is something we do, not who we are. And I think it's really tough to like navigate that sometimes and understand. And even myself going through some stuff when I stopped playing, you know, right before I jumped right into coaching, as part of why I was like, you know, I'm just away from it. Like I want to get back. And my wife, when she was done playing softball, like trying to find, you go from this giant structure, even just like, hey, at 8:00 you do this, at 10:30 is this, and like everything's just like laid out for you. And then it's like, okay, go, like use all those skills. And when you're playing travel softball or travel baseball, and then you're playing high school baseball, like everything is laid out for you. Every schedule is just made for you. And then you're expected to just go and just learn it all. And I think even too, like I'm assuming in the minor leagues it's the same way. When people stop playing, like, now what do I do with my time? Like, I don't go to the ballpark at 12:00 every day. Like, what do you mean? So I think it's important. I think it's a cool book for everybody, current and post, athletics. Because I'm sure there's a little bit of that kind of that post-mortem, that kind of goes on as well. So
yeah, go ahead.
No, that was it. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just the word when you were speaking and you said the word, it's structure, right? Because I remember that feeling as that first summer of retirement. You always report back in the fall, at least for college, or you get going and it was like, oh my gosh, like it's not here. Like there's no structure coming. And that feeling of just kind of freaking out, like you said, that you have to just go and you have to figure it out all by yourself. But I think, yeah, it's a learning curve, and it's a process. They talk about it with Olympic athletes. There's a huge percentage of Olympic athletes that after their Olympics are done and they're not going to be training anymore for the next 4 years or whatnot, the depression rates are through the roof and they have a really hard time identifying. And so I'm going to hold on to that Fitzgerald quote, where it's something we do and not who we are, because I think that's going back to early in the conversation with the Off the Field book. That was almost like like everyone that's contacting me about how could you give up baseball? You were our chance to be famous, all this stuff. It's like, no, baseball was just a game and I love it. It's amazing, but I've gone as far as I can go, and just continuing to pursue these, you're moving all over the country, the lower levels of baseball, you're making money, but come on, you're eating peanut butter and jelly, you're splitting rooms. Like it's when you're 25, 30 years old, that level of baseball gets a little tough sometimes, especially if you have business aspirations and different things like that. And so, yeah, it just comes down to your passion. And I think that word, once your career is ending, find another passion and don't be rigid with it. I think, like I have a saying, pursue your passion. When you're done playing, like for me, I wrote the books. I started a ChinaMcCarney.com website when I was done that I didn't even know what it was going to be. It was going to be motivation. I was going to be Tony Robbins. That lasted for 2 weeks. And then it's like you try a bunch of things out and then you find your path, or you keep a bunch of different things as part of your path so that you always have something that you can do. Because like you said, when it gets done and you've had all this structure for so long, and then all of a sudden you get to allocate your 24 hours a day, it's like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I don't have practice for 6 hours today. Like, what am I going to do? So it's just about kind of figuring out what your passion is. And if it is the sport that you played, like you and like me, stay in it somehow, right? And if you can't support yourself financially, like if you can't find a coaching job or you can't do this, work your job and then help out at a little league or do stuff like that. I have one of my best friends in Texas loves hockey, and he was working in this plant job. He was working 4 days a week, 10 hours, and he was exhausted. He's like, dude, I just miss hockey. I'm like, dude, there's got to be hockey in Texas. I mean, I know it's not cold over there all the time, but long story short, he found a rec league that he could go, and it's just about finding your passion and keeping passion in your life at all times.
I think it kind of goes towards like even having like other hobbies, during your playing career. That was something that, I really didn't have at all. And I found out when I was, even in coaching, when like even now during this quarantine, like I'm putting together all these Zoom calls and I'm trying to, like, how can I stay busy and work on my business and also, help players and interact with coaches and then learn more. And it's like this big like cluster of like, I'm got to be so busy. It's like, this is supposed to be like, we should be resting during this time and doing some things. And so, having some other hobbies that, you can get interested in outside of it. And then like, I think it's healthy to like take a break even, like even during that. And sometimes players do it through the off season. Sometimes they do it, they get a day off and it's a mental break and they're not supposed to do anything. And it's hard, and it's not easy to necessarily insert rest. Like it's not easy when you feel that passionate and that strong about your goals, right? Outside of even just what you like doing. But I think it's important to recognize even during that, like there's other things that you can kind of distract yourself with, and your mind needs that mental break.
Right. Yeah. And Alan, we get questions all the time about, how many weeks should I take off with my throwing program and different stuff like that. And one of the big things that Alan always says is, in conjunction, when your arm needs a rest after the season, more than that, your mind needs a rest. You need a break. You need a mental break, a decompress period. And so that's always one of the things with parents and different things where it's like, you've got to take a break, and you got to give yourself permission to take a break. And like back when I was going through the ranks, playing multiple sports was still a thing. And now it's almost like frowned upon. But for me, I played soccer, I played basketball in the rec leagues before baseball. Even in high school, I played soccer, which is right before baseball season. And it was a way to still compete and to stay in shape, but it was a break from that year-round, kind of grind to your one sport or whatnot.
Yeah, and I kind of want to, I want, like I said, I want to be respectful of your time. I want to kind of shift into throwing and some of the maybe modern throwing stuff. Because I remember when my dad bought the book, and he bought the DVD, and the first time we were watching the really old, I don't think they were even YouTube videos yet. I think they would have been, the grainy kind of the Jaeger long toss type style, and stuff that was kind of coming out, and that's kind of what I grew up on too. But now there's a lot more complicated things, out there, and I think there's value to a lot of things, and there's been a lot more research that's been done on it. Where do you guys kind of sit? Because obviously you guys are still a pivotal company and pivotal concepts into, you're integrated into almost all of the best throwing programs right now, but they are a little bit more complex. Where do you kind of see the industry maybe moving, and how else you guys, are helping outside of, the mental side and having the bands, and even people are manipulating the original, exercises and things like that. Is there a lot of complexity bias going on? Like, is it like as simple as just like doing it, especially talking with maybe some of the older athletes, who just kind of did it for a while and stayed really, really healthy? Or is it maybe just are we just coaching a different era of people who maybe sit on the couch more, and we're trying to make up for lost time, and we're trying to get creative and add research on that side of things?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I think that there's a marketing aspect to it as well, where complicated seems more knowledgeable, or when that's not always the case. I think the thing that I've always loved about Jaeger Sports is the simplicity of the implementation, because regardless of situation, you can implement arm circles, J-bands, and long toss. Arm circles and J-bands, once you get good at them, take about 8 to 10 minutes, and then long toss is individualized. And what I fell in love with was the freedom to push my own training routine within the throwing program. So like one of Alan's lines early on to me was, this is the Jaeger Sports program. It's going to be the China McCarney throwing program, because you're going to take the fundamentals, the foundation, and you're going to expand on it. And for me, regardless of, I used weighted balls. I loved them. I did a structured program. My velocity skyrocketed through the 2.5 years of my development, when I went from 5'11", 135 on my driver's license to 6'1", 175 or whatever it was back in the day. But I think just in terms of pure throwing, in terms of health and velocity, I think simple's better, especially in the off season, depending on your individual situation. If you're fortunate enough to have access to coaches, or you're comfortable enough in the program that you learned with the weighted ball or whatever else there is out there, I think you can implement that. The risk that we've seen is people buy weighted balls and they implement them by themselves without structure, without a program, and that can be detrimental. But if you have like the Drivelines of the world, or where you can implement the program, we're heavily partnered with Driveline, and that's, in my opinion, and there's so many other things out there, but Jaeger sports program supplemented by weighted balls is kind of like your strength training part of the arm. That's the golden era for me. I personally, because of when I played, the statistics and the overanalyzation, I get a little bit worried about paralysis by analysis. I want to keep things simple and I want to compete. But it goes back kind of to the same mental health theme, and I know Alan would echo these statements, is you try as many things out and you figure out what works for you. Our tagline on our website is listen to your arm. And we're an arm care company. We have programs that tell you what to do with your arm. And we still say, listen to your arm, because we can't feel what you feel. And so it comes to trying different things out, figuring out what works for you, and then implementing that, and I could go on much more long-winded take about the Jaeger Sports program or what I did, where I limited the reps. They told me to do 25. I loved 15, and they were fine with that. But I think at the end of the day, it comes back to something you said at the beginning of this conversation, which was consistency. And we were talking about a totally different topic. But what training routine can you be consistent with? What can you implement in the most circumstances? If all of a sudden you get to the park late for travel ball, or a lot of these times you're sharing fields and it's like, well, you only have 20 minutes to warm up. Okay, well, what programs can you do in the most circumstances that is going to get you prepared, put you in the optimal position to succeed, and stick with those? Because if you can be consistent with a program over time, that's going to give you the best chance to succeed. And then, I don't want to go too far into all the statistical analytics and all that stuff, which I actually love. I'm a math nerd, but I think when you're doing it with 10, 12, 13-year-olds that are still learning the fundamentals and still growing and developing into their bodies, I think simple is better at that young of an age and into the development part of baseball still, to me.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. I come from a hitting background, on that side of things. But I totally agree. I think someone asked me one time about like the assessments and some of the technology we have access to. Like, should it be the same for a 10-year-old versus like an 18-year-old? And like my answer to that from a facility perspective was like, it should not cost the same. Like if you're going to do a 10-year-old, like it should be a lot less, or it should be like a very low cost in general, because there's a lot of things that the assessment's going to tell me that I can see with my eyes. Like he's skinny and weak and needs to like add muscle because like that's what a normal 10-year-old looks like. He looks like a healthy 10-year-old. He doesn't look like an 18-year-old man, from that aspect. So that's kind of, I guess, part of why I was asking that. And I think you guys, do a really good job of being integratable and do a lot of different throwing programs because of how you guys operate and because of your tagline and slogan. And I think it's something that's really interesting, and kind of what came to my mind when you're kind of saying like, your different environments, you might only get to the field and everyone's sharing, or you might have a show and go day or rain delays, like all these different things that happen at all these different levels, is you almost need like a menu of like preparation based on what you have, right? And so if you have that option of like, hey, this is my 20-minute warm up with no equipment, this is what I can do, and I've got 45 minutes to an hour, this is what I can do, and I've got a trainer and a table and I'm getting soft tissue work done, and like it's like you just have to know your circumstances. And then I think that boils down, just to kind of wrap up and bring mental health into it, is if you don't feel prepared for 20-minute warm up because all you know is a 90-minute warm up, like I think that's a problem from like a confidence perspective.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely a problem. And Jim Batcher is the co-owner of Jaeger Sports, and he's who I work with every day in the office. And it's just natural. We'll talk about different situations, and we literally have dreams from time to time, and we'll laugh about it, where we don't get to do our warm-up, and then we're put on a mound, right? And we get anxiety in our sleep. And it's like, that's happening every day to players, like you said, mentally. And so, yeah, I think, and this is why I love conversations like this, because it gets my business brain going of like, ooh, like a warm-up menu, right? Like flip to page 10 for 20 minutes, if that's what you have. And the bottom line with the Jaeger Sports program is, I think people hear J-bands and it's like, yeah, I got to do my J-bands and different stuff like that. But it's like, do you know why you're doing your J-bands? And do you know what they're designed for? And or are you doing them because your coach told you? And the best analogy, what kind of clicked in my head at a young age, is I could run pretty good back in the day, not anymore. Don't get me out there anymore. But is like Alan told me, he said, if you were going to run a 60-yard dash and I gave you 10 minutes, I said in 10 minutes you're going to run your 60-yard dash time, because back then, I don't know if that's still a big thing at showcases now, but he goes, what would you do? You would get your legs as prepared as possible to go run that 60-yard dash for time, right? And he goes, well, what are you doing for your arm before you go to perform in a game or before you throw? That's the arm circles and the J bands. And it was like this aha moment of like, oh, wow, arm circles and J bands are blood flow, range of motion, heat to the throwing specific muscle groups, the rotator cuff, the whole arm, so that your arm is prepared for the act of throwing. And oftentimes we kind of look at the arm as a different thing, but it's a body part just like your legs or just like your obliques and your back, that you would never take a full hack before getting your body ready. And so you should never throw without first prepping the arm. And that's kind of, to put a bow on it, is that's in the simplest way. And there's nuances, and we do all kinds of visualization, throwing progressions, the mental side of the changeup, all that stuff. But if you just boil it down to what can everybody do and how can the Jaeger sports, like the way it changed my life, is I would never throw anything without doing arm circles and bands to prep my arm to throw. And that tiny 8-minute adjustment to your career, to your preparation, can make you avoid all of the avoidable injuries for the most part. There's going to be freak things. There's going to be throwing mechanics or tweaks or stuff that you just can't avoid, but you can avoid a lot of hamstring injuries by prepping your legs before you run. And you can avoid a lot of little tweaks and stuff in your arm just by doing arm circles, bands, or something to prep your arm for that act. And that's a mental adjustment that can significantly impact your career and your team's performance for sure.
No, that's awesome. That's great stuff. And I would have been 13, I guess, when I would have started this as well. And just quick kind of funny story. And then I do have one more question that just popped through our Slack channel because I mentioned we were recording. So Joe Kelly just threw his changeup through his window. Did you see that video?
Yeah, I saw that.
So the first time I tried to throw a circle change, I was literally just playing catch. They had all of us line up, and they're like, hey, you throw a circle change like this. And it was like the worst description of like how to throw it. Like I was like trying to like put it this way, and like it was terrible. And I threw it over the fence. And we were like indoors, and it was at a place called Fox Valley Sports Academy where they had like batting cages and like people standing around like behind it. And
oh, no.
The top part wasn't netted, but it was like a really high fence. And I threw it so far. And I remember my dad was like watching. He was so mad at me. He was like, that's just because you're not focused. I was like, no, it's because I was trying to throw it like this. And like, so Joe Kelly breaking his window made me think of that. And his wife's like in the background. So Joe's trying to learn a changeup or working on his changeup. I was like, been there, done that. Like,
yeah. See, and you were 13. He's in the big leagues and he's having trouble. So
exactly. Yeah. Oh, man, who's got way better stuff than I do. But anyways, so last question. This is kind of probably a layup to listen to your arm. But if you have a better way to describe it or something more to give, how often should you play long toss during the season?
So during the season, that's a great question. During the season, it's obviously going to depend on your position. If you're a starting pitcher, you've kind of got your whole week mapped out and you know when your bullpen day is. But if you're a long toss guy and you've built the base, we always have to start with that because we'll answer this question and then somebody will be in season and start to implement long toss when they've never long tossed before. But if you're a long toss individual that in the off season, you've built up 4 to 6, 8 weeks of long toss, kind of beast mode, what we call it. In season, you're going to long toss basically every day you're going to throw. If you're a position player, you'll stretch it out. So you're throwing with arc away from your partner, going out to 80 to 90% of your max distance. So you're still comfortable. You bring it back in, pull down, but not with 100% effort, maybe 60 to 70% effort every single day because your arm's going to be used to that. It wants to open up to its fullest potential. And that's basically continuing the blood flow, range of motion, everything you did with the arm circles and bands. And then your arm's going to be prepared for, if it's practice in and out, you're going to be ready to throw, with aggression and performance. If it's a game, you're for sure going to be ready from the first inning on. If somebody tries to take a bag on you or something, you're ready to throw. So that's for position players. For starting pitchers, one of your best long toss days is going to be your bullpen day. So let's say you're starting Saturday and you bullpen Wednesday. You do a full long toss before you get on the mound. Same thing as a position player. your pull down intensity varies. And it goes back to listen to your arm. You kind of figure out what varying degrees of aggression you need coming back in so that you're fully prepared once you get on the mound. But the key part to the answer is you're opening up your arm in the stretching out phase basically every day you're going to throw. So if you have a practice or you're going to throw a pen or you're light catching, that's basically stretching and keeping range of motion in your arm all week long. And so basically every day, I mean, in college, like for me, I think we practice 6 days a week. I'd say 7, but statute of limitations on NCAA rules and regulations. Coach didn't follow too many of those, but I'd open up basically every day, and then the difference would be I wouldn't pull down because just based on my years of doing it. And then the last thing I will add is for relief pitchers, especially at the higher levels, high school, good high school, college, pro, is we have a relief pitcher protocol that kind of goes through. You open your arm up pregame, you pull down at like 50% so that your arm stays open, and then you do arm circles or bands throughout the game so that when your time is called, you're ready to go. But long-winded, I'll say this to answer that question. Short, in season, you're long tossing basically every day with the stretching out phase, and then the listen to your arm part of it is you figure out how much you need to pull down to be ready for this is a practice day, this is a game day, etc.
And if you're, I know it's tough to demonstrate on a Zoom call. You've got a lot of videos and information on what those two phases are, right? And so even if you're just looking to YouTube it, we used to show that instead of me trying to explain it, because being indoors, having to throw in the nets, and I was trying to explain like what that looked like. So I would just pull up your guys' videos on how to do it, and I'd say, okay, now just pretend you're outside and go in this, and because it was 30 degrees, 25 degrees, 17 degrees, 5 degrees here in Chicago.
And it's our passion is these questions, right? Like that's where we're fortunate is everybody at Jaeger Sports live the Jaeger Sports program. And so YouTube, we have a 6-minute video. It's condensed, obviously. Don't think that took 6 minutes. That was about an hour. But it has a great visual of what the stretching out phase and the pull down phase looks like. So if you YouTube Jaeger Sports Long Toss, and then we have a year-round throwing manual that kind of navigates every question. Alan did an amazing job. Basically, every question he's gotten for 25 years, he put in the manual. So questions like that, how often should I be doing this in season, off season throwing, relief pitcher protocol, rehab protocol, inclement weather throwing is a big one. He does a great job. We have a free article online that goes through how to do a long toss into a net, how to simulate a long toss with a J-band if you can't get outside because of weather. And then something we just started, if you go on jaegersports.com, and all this is completely free, there's a resource tab now where we do like a 2-minute video answering, and there's a PDF and you can download text too if you like that better. But answering questions like this: how often should I do J-bands? What is long toss? What are the 2 phases of Jaeger Sports long toss? So our passion is, that's why we wanted to do this, and maybe we will one day, interactive arm care. That's kind of what we love to do. We love interacting. We love having conversations and answering those questions that aren't always asked, because when you're told to do something, that goes back to the beginning of the conversation, by a coach or a parent, you just do it. And then it's like, why am I doing J-bands and long toss? I don't even know, but I've been told to forever. So always educate yourself on what you're doing and take the parts of the, I always call them the ingredients. Take the ingredients that work for you and make it your best recipe, and you'll be on your way to optimizing your career and your life and be good to go.
Do you think coaches at all levels should take more time building context before even executing a practice? I just think about youth practices where it's day one, and it's like, okay, we got to do our warm-ups and we got to get this in, and we only have X amount of days before the game, and we got to do situations, and all up to the pro level where it's like, hey, spring training is only 30 days. We got to get everything in. We got to make sure we do every little second to make sure we're prepared, versus maybe sharpening the axe a little bit and having a little bit more purpose with less time because we built context up front. Or do you how would you maybe navigate that from a coach perspective to make sure they know why they're doing it, other than just, hey, everyone take a knee, I'm going to give you a 2-minute presentation on what this is?
I think that'll get me going, because I have such a, I'm not going to say an issue. I just wish we could take a step back, especially at the younger levels. Because at the older levels, a lot of guys have gone through their training and hopefully figured out why they're doing different things, but not always the case. So there should be context there. But especially with the younger kids, where it's like, why are you doing what you're doing? And there's so much. Jim, the co-owner, has a 13-year-old now and a 10-year-old. He has 2 boys, and he coaches every year. He gets wrangled into coaching every year. It's hilarious to me, because I'm not going to coach this year. And then he's the head coach, and he's all in. And practice time is the thing, you know. You get one day or you get this. So coaches get this angst of like, I have to fit everything in. Like you said, we have to get ground balls. Well, we have to do pickles. We have to do this. And it's like, if you took one day and you just, like you said, context day of this is why we're going to do what we do, or every drill that you do is 3 minutes at the beginning of that drill really going to ruin your practice, to just explain why you're doing what you're doing, or the importance of it, or the mind-body connection in certain situations and whatnot. So, yeah, to answer your question, if this was R-rated, there'd be a word before the yes. But, yeah, absolutely, there should be context and explanation as to why we're doing what we're doing. And, like, I think Peyton Manning, and I know Josh Rosen when he was coming out of UCLA quarterback, but Peyton Manning is famous for they be in quarterback meetings and the coach would be saying something and implementing something, and Peyton Manning would say, why? And the coach is like, what do you mean why? I'm the coach. Like, and Peyton Manning was so educated, and he was so like, he's like, well, why are we doing this? And so him and the coach would talk about why they're doing specific schemes or specific packages based on the defense. And then they'd have a clear understanding together of why they were moving forward with that plan. And I think that's, you know, it goes back to that same thing with, I think one of the questions that I've had fun asking is, do you know why you do J-Bands? Because they hear Jaeger Sports, or they know, they're like, oh, you're from Jaeger Sports, J-Bands. And it's like, oh, yeah, J-Bands. Why do you do them? And it's like, they feel good. And it's like, well, yeah, but like the science behind it and how they were designed specifically for preparation for the act of throwing and different things. But yeah, no, that's the fun part of teaching and the fun part of learning. And if you take the approach like you, and you have that thirst for, you know, just adapting and always evolving and looking at it from the player's perspective, I think that's the fun of being in this profession and being, you know, doing what you do, is always trying to look for different things to help the players first and foremost, and help them develop first as human beings, and then within the game that they're pursuing. I think that's the fun part. So stuff like context and those questions are the fun threads to pull, and just no one has it figured out perfectly. And I think that's the fun part of sports, athletics, and coaching. And God, do we miss it right now?
Yeah, for sure. Well, China, hey, I know I said that we would maybe stop around 25 to 30, and now it's 45. So I want to be respectful of your time. I really appreciate you taking the time this morning. Great information. I had a lot of fun talking, learned a lot too. So I really appreciate it, man.
No, I appreciate it, Ryan. It's people like you that are making the game better, and what makes the passion of Jaeger Sports grow every day. So it's funny, we've had a relationship for years, and to finally get a chance to speak and kind of break down some stuff was fun. And I appreciate it, and hope everybody's staying safe and staying positive out there for sure.
Absolutely. Yep. Thanks again, man.
Thank you.